Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Beth Bechtel.
Someone not in my super immediate friend circle or someone not family of mine, who was that band? Shout out. Toad the Wet Sprocket. Thank you very much, Toad the Wet Sprocket. Some of you who come to our events over the last few years know that the event team always tends to play a whole compilation list of Beth Bechtel's favorite hits. I am starting to get a little embarrassed in that it is heavy Backstreet Boys. Now it's Toad the Wet Sprocket that everybody's like, who the heck are they? Check them out. It was a 90s college band for me, so got a chance to see them on Rewind tour here recently. You can corner me on that some other time. We'll keep going there. Hope you're enjoying your lunch. Hope you have had a great morning and a chance to spend some time with people at your table and people who are networking during our breaks. I'm really excited, as I am excited for every session that we have, but I am really excited about the conversation that we're going to get to, I think in some ways be a part of here over our lunch hour. For those of you who've attended our summits in the past, you know that sometimes over lunch we kind of try to take a little bit of a breather from ag bioscience, sort of thrown at you in a really intense way, kind of try to lighten it up a little bit. We've had filmmakers, we've had authors. This particular conversation, I think you're gonna really enjoy. Lucas Mann and Sam Kass are with us, and I'll just say, bios of all of our speakers are obviously in the program books at your table. We choose not to read people's bios because we know all of you can read. And it takes time, right, away from the conversation itself. So I would encourage you to open up those booklets and read the bios. They're going to tell some stories about their backgrounds that I think will add to them. But let me just, before I bring them out, let me just say that I think sometimes you all realize that certain relationships and certain introductions can sometimes happen in some of the most unexpected places. And about a year ago, I was in San Francisco for an Ag Tech Summit and was connected actually by Aaron Gillum here, who was earlier on the program, to a guy named Lucas and a guy named Gareth. And it's kind of just, you should just meet them, sort of get to know them. And I said, happy to. And we connected in the hotel lobby and saw sort of the masses of people at this particular event and decided, let's go across the street to the bar. And so ended up spending the next couple of hours together getting to know more about Lucas and Gareth, his partner, and about Acre. And what I have really come to appreciate about the group of people involved in this investment group, Sam Kass being a new introduction to all of us here at AgriNovus, is just how incredibly visionary, big thinking, and seeking to disrupt all things in food and agriculture in a really serious way. And they'll talk a little bit about some of their investments, their personal backgrounds, their journeys to this space, but I know you're really going to enjoy hearing from them. So please join me in welcoming Sam Kass and Lucas Mann to the stage. Thank you. Sam, thanks.
Hello. How are you guys doing? Good.
Having lunch. There's like a joke about a West Coast venture capitalist and an Obama guy walk into an ag thing in Indiana. But here we go. And Beth, I went to college in Santa Barbara, and Toad the Wet Sprocket's a Santa Barbara band, so I'm with you. Yeah. Okay, so this is really going to focus on Sam, but I just want to make a couple of comments ahead of time based on some things that I saw this morning. There was a slide this morning about pushing boundaries, which I appreciate. And I think in the role of venture capital in agriculture these days, that may be, we should switch that to pushing our luck or pushing our limits. And we're an investor in farmers business network, so you can probably all relate to that now. Those of you that are rolling your eyes now are probably pushing our luck is a thing. That's okay though. So the slide that resonated with me this morning was about the coast coming in. And for us, because our mode of disruption is a collaborative one that understands the incumbencies based on our backgrounds, this idea of the coasts, or whatever you want to call them, coming in resonates. And in fact, in my previous time in Indiana, I got to spend some time with Governor Daniels, who thanked me for, and I apologize, but these are his words, for not being a lazy ass and coming here. And that's something that we believe in. And the work that is happening here at AgriNovus, at Purdue, and we've been spending some time with the Research Foundation, certainly the Next Level Fund has been good to us. We believe in what's happening here, and we want to pay attention to that. One of our early investments is Inari Agriculture, who's here in West Lafayette, as well as in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And that connection between what's happening here, what's happening in Cambridge, what's happening in Ghent, Belgium, is relevant. And these are people that understand, I think, agriculture quite deeply. So I just wanted to kind of mention that and think about, we're here for two reasons today, Sam and I. One is as a business. So we have a venture fund called Acre. We've invested in a number of things, Farmers Business Network and Inari and Involved Biosystems, but that's not really what we're doing here. What we're doing here today, I want to think about is not pushing boundaries, but actually removing boundaries. Because for the most part, neither of us were ever on a path to be here until we wound up being here. And so for the folks in the room, in particular, the younger folks, anybody from Purdue or any of the postdocs, or certainly anybody in this room that is trying to figure out what to do, that's who we want to speak to. So as part of this being a collaborative conversation, feel free to stand up, use the microphones. Let's not wait for Q&A, just come up and let's talk. So I'm going to make this about Sam, but the only reason I'm kind of qualified, I think, to be here is that I've had a number of lives as an entrepreneur. I've been in the music business, the hospitality business, the finance business, but always in my own startups. The connection between all those things has been understanding and incumbent enough to figure out how to create a disruption, but in partnership. And so my new focus on agriculture, which is about 5 years old, is related to our past in the food system. Through that, I got to meet my dear friend and now partner, Sam Kass, who will explain to you how he went from being a baseball player to a cook to a chef to a private chef to the head of food policy in this country in the Obama White House, and then what he's doing now. So who better to tell you about that than him?
I guess so. Well, it's great. It's really great to be here. I'm from Chicago, so it's just always good to get back to the Midwest, and it feels like home and a culture that I can relate to. So how did this all go? I will not bore you with a long, drawn-out thing, but you're looking at a failed baseball player who had big dreams. Went to junior college and actually in Kansas, trying to get drafted. Ended up transferring back to the University of Chicago and started my last semester abroad. Started cooking randomly in a. Actually, it's just actually good to say. It was the head of my program's husband, uncle's friend from college, son, who rode bicycles with the sous chef of the best restaurant in Vienna, said, "You may want to go meet this guy if you're interested in food." And that's really, honestly, that's actually what it was, and that's the only reason I'm here today. Learned how to cook. Use that as a vehicle to kind of travel around the world, but very early on in my training, really started understanding the implications that food had both on our health and actually the role that it was playing in undermining and degrading our health, and the impact that it has on climate and the environment, on the communities that are producing our food, the farmers that are growing it, et cetera. And so once I started asking those questions of myself early days, I just sort of dove all into that and stopped studying recipes.
Still a pretty good cook.
I can cook a pork chop. We have a good pork chop story. That's why I bring it up. So I came back to Chicago trying to figure out how to organize chefs around our food system, and got connected with a family there, reconnected with a family there after I'd been gone for about 5 years, sort of cooking and traveling my way around the world. Sent them an email about offering to help. They wrote back right away, said that would be great, and that was Michelle Obama, just Michelle at that time, because he had just announced his run for presidency. And it was just grandma, so they had no help. And she needed to campaign and take care of the two. The girls were quite young and still had a job, so she had a lot on her plate and very little support. And so I started helping them a few times a week. In fact, it's actually funny to think about now. The way it actually was set up was I would come, cook dinner, we'd hang out, and then I'd make enough and left plates in the fridge for them to reheat the next day. Which now, like looking back on that, is kind of funny, because you would never serve the president, leftovers, like a cold plate of leftovers. But it was like totally fine. I hadn't thought about that in a while, actually. I'm just gonna do a little side story right now, because there was one time, the most scared I think I've ever been in my life was I got a call from somebody else who was there, was like, "Where's dinner?" I was like, I left it in the fridge. They're like, "No, where's dinner?" I was like, "Go downstairs. I left it in the fridge. I promise you. I handle my business." And he goes down there. He's like, "All I see is 4 plates of rice." And I'm sitting there thinking, and turns out the president's brother-in-law was there, and throughout the night ate all the scallops that were on the plate. And I was sitting there like, what? I love that I'm telling this story in public. So I need a clip of this so I can send it to him. And I'm sitting there, I'm just like, God, what happened? Conrad. And I knew who it was. And I nailed it. Anyway, so that was back in the day.
Scallops? That sounds kind of gross. But.
Hey, listen, we were just trying to make it happen, man. It was like we didn't have a lot, and we were making it happen. So then, of course, we started dreaming about what we could do to help improve health, because she saw the impact that I did a lot of work to improve the food in their house. And she saw the impact that had both on her and on the girls. And we started talking about how families were struggling to just raise healthy kids, and so we started dreaming about what was possible if we actually got in the White House and we do a garden, we could do a big health initiative around kids. And then we started laughing at ourselves because he was 30 points down the polls. His name was Barack Obama, and we didn't think he had a chance, but he proved us wrong.
That's true. So, and by the way, maybe it's the perfect thing to be sitting here in front of 500 people eating sandwiches, which is the dream. But you basically transformed from a chef to a policymaker, and besides running the Let's Move Foundation as executive director, you ran food policy in this country. What was whether a day in the life, or what did you see relative to how policy is shaped and how that may be pertinent to folks in this room?
Yeah. So my day was pretty intense. I'd get to the White House around 7. I'd work out with them and the trainer in the morning, and then race, take a shower, get dressed, go to the East Wing, and start working on Let's Move.
Just in case nobody or some people don't know what Let's Move is.
Yeah, so Let's Move was the First Lady's campaign to focusing on children's health. So that dealt with things like school nutrition policy, getting better access to information and marketing of foods to kids, better access to healthy nutrition, physical activity improvements, especially in schools, and early childhood development as it related to nutrition, which are sort of 5 key areas. So I would work on that, and then also much broader food policy issues during the day. And those, so those days were always quite intense. And then oftentimes would literally have to run to the residence because it was like 5:30 and I had a half an hour to get dinner ready. And so I'd say that my cooking skills in the time in the White House, I think, significantly diminished. I got really fast. And now with 2 kids, it's actually serving me quite well. We both have 2 young kids, so I can get dinner on the table pretty quickly. And normally in the White House, you have 8 hours to cook dinner, and I would take about a half an hour. So there are trade-offs, right? So I'd do dinner with the family, and one thing to note about them is that no matter where he was, unless he was on the West Coast and just couldn't get back or overseas, they had dinner as a family every single night at 6:30, which was a pretty profound thing to watch, just seeing 2 people who were so busy, but they would stop everything that was going on, and it would be like classic family dinner where basically whatever that happened, and it would be like what happened in Sasha's day, what happened in Leah's, they'd be talking, and they'd be like, oh yeah, everything okay, Dad? Everything good? You know, it's like a total afterthought. Like nobody cared about what was happening in his life.
That's real life.
Yeah, that's real life. And then him and I would go play a few games of pool after dinner, just to sort of unwind. And then I'd have to go home and catch up on like the 5 hours of work I just had missed because, you know, everybody's sending their emails. So I didn't sleep very much in my time there.
So food policy, which is a position that doesn't exist anymore, how does food policy relate to agriculture, sort of in the folks that you were meeting with and the time that you spent there?
Yeah, I mean, policy obviously has a major role to play. I would meet with everybody, from all the way upstream, all the big players upstream, all the input companies, seed companies, all the way through the supply chain, all the manufacturers, all the retailers. Like, you know, you're deeply engaged with everybody. And I think what I learned there was that obviously policy has, and there's a raging debate about government's role and where policy should land. But I think everybody agreed it has some role in how we eat and how we produce our food. And I would argue it has an important role. But the thing that I really learned was how minimal that role ultimately is. Food and agriculture is a private sector endeavor. The government directly feeds very few people. We directly shape school nutrition. The military purchases a ton of food. But after that, it actually has a relatively small role. That businesses are what are driving what we're eating. And in the end, what really shapes these decisions way more than policy does is our culture and the things that we value and the foods that we like to eat. And, our culture is shaping both our policy, like from the voting booth, we're shaping like what our politicians care about or don't care about. And businesses are definitely responding deeply to what our desires are, what we want and what we don't want. And so really like the change, for anybody who's seeking change, it really does have to be rooted in both like who we are as a culture and the values that we're trying to bring to how we're producing the food we're eating. I mean, the thing that really changed for me, going in as a young person who cared and was trying to make an impact, is that once you get into the White House, you go in with like your ideals and your image of like where you think things should go, and that's where most people who are working on these issues, a lot of them stay there. And but when you're actually responsible for either like producing the food, as many of you are, or you're responsible for actually making the change, you have to start with reality and then work towards where you see progress going, and that grounds you in a pretty profound way. But so I guess it's to say that I think policy has an important role, but it's not going to be the driver of change.
Well, interestingly, we actually met you. By the way, even though I'm holding these, we're just making things up. But the way that we met you was the royal we, meaning my partners at Acre and of course Sam. We bought and then sold and then bought a carrot farm called Bolthouse Farms. So it's about 70,000 acres of growing, produces roughly, depending on about roughly half the carrots used in the United States, and then lots of processing. So more than 1 million feet of processing up in the Central Valley in California. But the person who's our partner that sold and bought it, Jeff Dunn, was the president of Coca-Cola for the Americas and the CMO before that, and so understands how to market. And so there was this overlap because you met him in the office of the First Lady because as he bought carrots, he called it Coke to carrots and did things like put them in foil wrappers and vending machines and schools and how do you really push in there? There's some overlap there, I think, with the work of the government.
Yeah, tons. I mean, I think, and we were really trying to take a different approach as well. I think for us, most of what I honestly did on the Let's Move side was there was a big sort of marketing, kind of communications. How do we bring these issues to kind of the center of our culture and make it fun and make, better eating fun and make vegetables cool. And then the other side was really working, mostly what I did was work with large companies to try to help them change how they did practices and then support those kind of changes. So did a big thing with Jeff around how do you market, like fruits and vegetables. Kids see 5,000 ads for junk food every year and 100 for fruit, vegetable, whole grains, and water. That's the disparity our kids are getting. And so a part of what we tried to do, and through work with Jeff, and as I met him, was like, how do you take the power of marketing and bring it to better eating? Because right now, part of the problem has been, people who care about nutrition are like, eat the broccoli, it has fiber and vitamin B. And like these other guys are like, drink this, be full of love, sex, and happiness. And you're just like, okay, well, love, sex, and happiness is going to kick the butt of fiber and vitamin B every time. So we need a little more love when it comes to vegetables. And so that's really what we tried to do. And it was, very outside the box from a government standpoint. And in fact, like they had to rewrite all the kind of standards of how the White House could engage the private sector because of the work that we did. Because in the end, that's what became very clear to me very quickly. So there's some real policy things that we pushed through and we needed to do, like school nutrition reform was huge, revamping nutrition facts, and the pyramid was really important. There's all kinds of other extended work on, that got into deeper agriculture stuff as well. But if you're going to change it, like we need to do work with, say, Walmart, because they're supplying the food for a huge part of the population, and we did a huge partnership with them, and I still have scars to prove that, because in a Democratic administration, doing a big public partnership with Walmart was not the easiest thing to get through the political apparatus. But we did it because they were really committed to actually helping their customers eat healthier and make it easier for them. And I knew that their impact, their power in the food system was such that they could really move the whole industry. And it was worth the capital, political capital that we were going to expend. And that, by the way, like those kind of decisions went to the president and first, those kind of things go all the way up because that was a big deal. But because it was the right thing for families, and we were ready to take that on. So I think there's a big space in the middle where the private sector and the public sector should be working together. There's some areas where they're just going to disagree, where there's too much entrenched interest, and there's going to have to be sort of a fight over where a policy should be set. But I think there's a big space where there's a lot of work that can be done, and that's true for innovation as well.
I think in some modes of innovation, you look now in agriculture, there's quite a bit of consolidation in the incumbency, and what does that mean for innovation? And it's all we could spend 2 days on that, and it could be polarizing. But what I would say to the folks in the room, the young folks in particular, or the researchers or the entrepreneurs, this is an incredible moment. Yeah. I mean, the science, the bioscience, the things that are available, the way that we think about the incumbency and the consolidation, the way that capital thinks about that, and not all capital understands it. I'd say these days it's quite vogue to be a food and agriculture investor, and the result of that is things are priced, unrelated to reality. Yes. Let's call it California economics. Somebody said that to me once.
I like that.
And for us, the connection.
That might resonate in this room.
Yeah. Well, I can actually see faces. So
yeah, those California economics, yeah.
But when you think about innovation, you think about incumbencies and these big corporates. I know that in some of your time you do spend with the C-suites of some of these large Fortune 100s working on this mix of climate and agriculture and food and health and sustainability, and what does that mean for the future of these large companies?
So like as part of our ecosystem, part of our whole thesis is, and what's different about us than a lot of money that's coming into the space, is that we have we're deeply rooted in the food system. We've run food businesses. We've looked at policy across the whole spectrum. We have deep relationships throughout, and so some of what I do is working with a couple of really big players who are fundamentally trying to transform their supply chains and their whole product offering around health and climate. Not only do they see big operational risks that they're going to have to start dealing with and contending with, but the consumer is just changing, and they see the force. Really, as when we look at the landscape, there's a few forces that are really shaping the food system now that I think are going to accelerate. One, we have climate, which is already dramatically making it more and more difficult globally to produce the food that we are doing now. And food and agriculture is the number 2 driver of greenhouse gas emissions globally, and probably in the next 20 to 30 years will be the number 1 driver. And when you look at the curve, it's going straight up. So unlike energy, where we can see a future where we're actually starting to bring down our footprint, food and ag is going like this. And the pressure is going to increase not only on our ability to produce the food, but also as a focused spotlight of like global attention on food as a core source of driving this challenge. That's one. Two, human health is really disintegrating. You have 1 in 3 kids in the United States on track to have diabetes. 1 in 3. Think about that. Like our system, our healthcare system simply will collapse if a third of the population is diabetic. A diabetic is twice as costly to the system as a non-diabetic. So the cost, and also just like the quality of life, is extraordinary. And you have 2 billion overweight or obese people globally. So this is not like just a U.S. problem. It's something that's happening globally. As you said, like there's been tons of consolidation at every corner of the market, and that's sort of taken the place of innovation. So innovation budgets have been gutted all the way upstream through downstream. We're just not seeing, especially from the incumbents, real innovation in decades.
Right, we call it iteration or product line.
Yeah, it's like from the CPG side, it's like the purple version of the red thing, right? And we're not really seeing any true innovation that's coming from internally inside the companies, and that's true way upstream as well. And one indication of that there's a problem, like every CEO of the major food companies has been fired in the last 3 years. Nobody has been able to crack this from their vantage point. You have all this emerging technology that we're seeing and that we're investing in that we're super excited about. That's either old tech being applied in a new way or fundamentally breakthrough technologies like Inari, who you'll hear from, that has the poise to really transform how we're producing our food. And then you have just a transformation of consumer preference and values. Like the 35 and under just really sees food differently than their parents. And like for thousands of years, like you ate what your parents ate, right? Like food is deeply cultural, and we passed it down. The modern U.S. version was like if you were a Coke drink, if your parents were Coke drinkers, you were a Coke drinker. And if you were a Pepsi, it was like teams, and you like had brand loyalty and associations that were passed down from generation to generation. That got really disrupted around 35-year-olds. And the 20-year-old is deeply passionate about food when it comes to health and climate change, and really is expressing their beliefs, their identity, their politics in the foods and brands that they associate. So when that 35-year-old is 45 and that 20-year-old is 30, you're going to see a massive part of the marketplace that's driving change even faster than they already are. And I think you're going to see the trends that are happening now just accelerate dramatically. So I actually think we're only at the very, very beginning, because while that's going on, the problems are going to be getting worse. And I think the worse and tougher it gets, the faster things are going to have to move, because we're going to be just dealing with real problems to solve. And so when we look at that, like that for me creates this ecosystem where now's the right time to be investing with the right companies, the right entrepreneurs, in the right place for people who actually know about agriculture, who actually know about food, to try to really start making a lot of progress. And we're going to have to. It's either we're going to do it on our own terms, or it's sort of going to be done to us. And by the way, like that's where government comes in too, because a lot of times, they're just too slow, and so then they're reacting to something that goes down, and it's just a heavy-handed, poor use of a policy mechanism, right? As opposed to creating the conditions for that. But yeah, that's how I see it shaping up.
I think one of the things that we are seeing in the startup ecosystem is that, of course, there is this layer of go fast, break things, valley people that are pumping all this capital into an area they don't really understand.
Yeah.
And that's been, I think, good eating, frankly, for folks like us. And certainly for folks that have much longer and deeper backgrounds in agriculture than us. I mean, we're food people pushing into agriculture because those things are so intrinsically related.
Yeah.
That having an understanding of the system matters. So for the younger folks in the room, and the FFA folks in particular, this idea of, and we should actually talk about that because you said something to me backstage. I'll remind you of this pushing into new frontiers. So the actual removing of boundaries. I mean, not in a California economics way, but in a ground truth and science-based way. There is a new reality, I think, and I would really impress on folks that the idea that you can remove these boundaries is true. The idea that your path does not have to be straight is fine. I mean, we weren't supposed to be here. I won't even tell you what I got my degree in, but I don't have a business degree. I did go to Santa Barbara, which would be like, that's the only strike I'm willing to take while we're sitting here. By the way, I haven't heard anybody chew in a long time. It means that the mics are open and we only have 13 minutes, but just relative to the future farmers.
Yeah.
You said
So
something.
I hear there's future farmers here. Is that true? Raise your hands. There you go. Back in there. There you go. Why are you being so...
Be proud about that.
Yeah.
Right here.
You guys are not bashful. I know you guys. You're not bashful. So I'll tell you, I was in the White House for 6 years. I met with every CEO. I met with all Republicans, Democrats, people who loved us, people who hated me. Like, got it from all sides. And the toughest meeting or like event that I ever did by far was with future farmers. And there was this, not toughest in a bad way, but like there was an event there, you know, there was, I don't know, a couple hundred came to the White House, and I got to speak about our work and then open up for dialogue and questions. And the best questions I got, the smartest questions, and I'm not just pandering at all, that I got my entire 6 years was from future farmers. Smartest, most nuanced, most sophisticated, like right to the hardest issues. Hardest question of the hardest issues, like bam, like what do you think about this? And I was like, oh, okay, I better wake up for this. So I never came away more inspired about like what was possible and, you know, the future of food just because of the quality of young people's thinking on these issues. So I'm glad you guys are here. You know, we're really, you know, mostly the older generation has sort of made a lot of progress on certain things, but have left a lot of big problems to you guys. And, you know, it's not fair, and shouldn't be how it is, but, you know, we're going to need your commitment and vision and innovation and kicking out the status quo. Like, this is just how it's been done, so this is how we do it, and continue to find new ways of making things happen. And, you know, like, I've never known a better group to do that, so I'm glad you guys are here.
Actually, really uniquely positioned to do it because you understand the system.
Yeah.
And there's all these new entrants in the system that really don't understand the system, that
Yeah.
want to break things and go fast. And, you know, good luck with that.
Question, yes.
Hey, Sam and Lucas, I just want to dive into what you were talking about a little bit more on that note. I am a past FFA member, so a
Nice.
lot of what you're saying was resonating with me. I'm also 20, so you got the double whammy there. You talk about this being the beginning of the conversation. So how, as young people, can we really strive for a great beginning to unfolding these new times and consumer trends? Because you're talking about how consumers will really be able to change even more in the coming years. So what's the best way, again, broad question, but what do you think are the best ways to really unfold this conversation in a profound, deep way to be able to actually have progress and create that better food ecosystem for the future?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think this plays out in sort of your like personal life, and then there's your professional life. There's two ways to look at it. I mean, I think in the personal life, you know, we just have to continue to struggle to try to live our ideals and like the values that you care about. And as somebody who's very public with my values and has dedicated my life to trying to, you know, do those in all different forms, you know, like I still throw out a bunch of food. Like I'll still eat a steak. And happily, you know, like. There's like we're inherent contradictions, but we're, you know, trying to move towards those values that, you know, in your real life, which is really hard because, you know, currently that's not the environments we tend to live in. So that's one. On the professional side, you're 20, like, oh my God, so awesome. We're like old, tired parents of young kids now, so that sounds so great.
It's true.
It's true. I think right now it's about learning and exploration and trying things out. And this idea that, you know, I think young people are often given this bar of like, find what you're passionate about, as if like you should know the job that will unlock your passion. And you can have an area of super interest, or you may find like I really am passionate about these kind of issues. But for me, like I really love food. Then I started cooking it. I like fell in love and became very passionate about it, but knew like I didn't want to cook for, honestly, like I just didn't want to cook for wealthy people my whole life. Like that, there was a part of it that was missing for me. And then I started combining like my values on, that's just true. I mean, I was like 22, 23, like I was not much older than you. I was like, this is amazing, but there's something missing. But then there's this other impact side that I started to love, and then then I started studying policy and tax policy and all kinds of random things long before I met the Obamas. Like I dove in deep, and then you keep iterating. And now I'm super passionate about finding young entrepreneurs that I believe in, that we believe in, that we think both have an idea that can change the world and are the right people to change the world. And then we're in it to try to help them succeed. That's our whole job, is to help them succeed. And so I guess passion can take on different forms and grow and evolve over time. And so you should just go work for a big company, go work for a startup, get out of the United States. Probably the best thing that I did was I've been to 60 countries. I just tried to travel and go see what else is out there. It helps give you a really deep perspective on where you're from, how great it is, parts of it that need improving. So, I would just try to have as many experiences as you possibly can. And the chef that trained me in Vienna, first week, he gave me 2 rules that I really have lived by. He gave me three rules. One is taste everything you make. So basically try out whatever it is you're doing. Never, can I swear in here?
No.
Never serve shit.
That's okay.
Thank you for the permission.
Some are okay, some are not okay. That was okay.
But that's a really profound rule that's applicable to any profession. If you're not going to eat it, don't give it to somebody else. Rule number 2. And the third thing he gave me, first week, was the minute you come here and you feel really comfortable, leave. So in this time for you where you're just trying to grow and learn, the minute you're okay, I figured this out, I got this, and I'm not showing up a little nervous, get out of there. Go do the next thing. Because you have more to learn. You can only learn so much in one place.
I have this is totally unrelated, but totally related to FFA. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and I grew up in the music business. My dad was in the music business. And when I grew up, the internet happened. So I inherently knew about 2 things, the music business and the internet. And I got a lot of credit for starting companies that had to do with those things that I just knew. And so it was easy for us to do things, and our cohort was, most people won't know this, but Sean Parker and Sean Fanning and Napster, and we started all these things. And, we just were doing what we already knew. And I spend a lot of time around entrepreneurs, and I've been around some great ones. And some people talk about entrepreneurs don't see the barriers between them and the finish line. And I think that's true to a degree, and it's important that that's true. But I think in real businesses, which is to say agriculture, which is maybe one of the last great disrupted businesses globally, size-wise, truly disrupted, you do have to understand the boundaries and the barriers. And you can go to school and learn that, or you can just know it. And if you just know it, you're actually primed, to innovate. And so this idea of removing boundaries is not related to fantasy. It's related to ground truth. But you're way ahead of the game because you already know what this is like.
Thank you. I also have another question too. So we're talking about, again, I feel like we're all here because of change and the way that the food industry and ag tech is creating lots of change. So because of that, again, I think we're seeing lots of competing perspectives in the space. What do you feel are the best ways to really engage in that? Because again, as that 20-year-old Gen Zer, I think that our generation really values collaboration and uniting people. So how do we do that in the world that we're living in today, especially when it comes to food?
Yeah. For me, it really just comes down to, I think there's a lot of debate around technology. Is it good? Is it bad? Which I think is a completely wrong sort of framework. For me, we're just talking about tools. We're talking about new ways of operating, new tools to bring to market. And the real question for me is based on what values will those tools be applied? So are they helping, which doesn't mean it always lines up, but are these tools helping farmers have more successful businesses? Are they helping preserve our natural resources? You look at, we're running out of soil globally, we're running out of water. There's real challenges. So are these tools being used to preserve the natural resources that we are able to grow our food on and with? And are they contributing to the health and well-being of eaters? Or are they just finding a way to take out somebody and just extract some profit from the system? And for me, we're in business, so these companies have to make money, otherwise they're not going to be around. So, so that part for me is an important driver of everything. If it's not going to be a big business or a successful business, then there's no point. But I think the question becomes, be clear on what your values are, and then use those as filters to say, this is the kind of thing I support, this is the kind of thing I don't. And one tool could be used in very different ways, right? So I think that's how you can start to filter out, like, how do I make that decision to be in, work with this company or not? And I think, go ahead.
I just want to make sure we get time for my man in the back, so I'm lovingly going to cut you off.
What'd you say?
I want to make sure we have time.
Oh, there's a man. Oh, God, it's very hard to see. Yes,
She
sir,
got
go
two.
ahead.
All right, so earlier today was discussed about the part of consumer choice in the market, which is really great, and I'm glad that it was got brought up today. And I think that one conversation that gets brought up a lot when we talk about consumer choice is the GMO, non-GMO, organic conversation.
Yeah.
So my question goes around is, from your perspective, what's the best way to ensure that we have a balance between those non-GMO, GMO, and organic products? Because right now it seems we're in a position where we're almost imploding on ourselves in the industry. So how can we balance between making sure both of those sectors are advanced, and we're not necessarily arguing amongst ourselves and we're doing what's best for the consumer?
They do get right to it, don't they?
Right. Are you a future farmer?
He's wearing a jacket, yeah.
Yeah, you're a future farmer. I think that was basically the opening question when I sat down with those kids in the White House. I was like, man, okay.
You have 1 minute?
Yeah, 1 minute. We may run over 1 minute over time.
Okay.
It's like Saved by the Bell. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally comfortable with this conversation. I think part of the problem is we haven't had this conversation. Part of the problem was for decades, basically the message was, it's fine, don't worry about it. And I think that created a vacuum that allowed all these other voices to come in and demonize the technology and create a lot of problems. But there are some challenges in the way that we're producing our food and the system that we have now. It's been a great miracle and a breakthrough on many levels, and it's had some very significant unintended consequences, which we have not owned at all as a community. So I think the lack of transparency has been a real problem over time. It's changing now. I think hopefully what I'm hoping is that as the technology is evolving, especially with CRISPR and editing, that we're going to get past this phase of the conversation and show that there is a new set of tools that have, I think, a better consumer value proposition so that we can have a kind of restart this conversation in a way that people can relate to more, be less scared of, and show that these tools can actually really help everybody. And until we do that, I think that these tools are going to be exposed to, demonization by a certain, smaller section of society that has a pretty loud voice and feels like they don't have any influence. So I know you guys feel under assault on the other side, but they feel like they have no influence. So that's why they scream and yell and go crazy, because like in Washington, nobody cares about them. And so that's where you start to get further polarization of like the sides, which is ridiculous. There's no reason why. It's never going to be that it's going to be one or the other. It needs going to be, especially given the challenges that we face, we're going to need every tool in our toolbox to like come close to even beginning to meet the challenges that we face. And so I think part of it is about being more transparent, making sure we're applying these tools that actually help people, and also like supporting, other modes of agriculture. Right now, as these issues play out, it is a war because like everybody's fighting for dollars, and that other side gets basically nothing. And so that's also part of why the language and around it becomes just worse and worse and corrosive.
I saw some market research recently that ran some focus groups that said three things about GM versus gene editing and gene knockout and the various things. And this was a cohort of millennials, one East Coast, one West Coast, one Midwest, people that were up to date on the issues. And three things were learned. One is nobody cares about or understands the difference between GM and gene editing. Yeah. Most of that cohort doesn't care about eating GM food. They've been doing it for a long time, and so they don't care. And the third is they just want to be told what it really is. So no baloney, no hiding. This thing's counting up now, but we have one last.
Last question.
So actually, my question ties in perfectly to what you were just getting to. So I represent probably a non-traditional player in this room, Contemporary Museum, the third largest living history museum in the country, whose goal is to redefine how the world views and uses museums. We have a really unique land mass in central Indiana of 1,046 acres that we envision telling the future story of agriculture and food production. So I'm curious from your perspective, how do you leverage non-traditional partners like museums and education systems, where museums are oftentimes more trusted than even the school system is, to get that message out to combat those 5,000 junk food messages that they're hearing and the 100 great messages they're hearing about vegetables and fruits and grains. So what role do you see non-traditional partners playing in all
That's
this?
awesome. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned this. We started an initiative called Let's Move Museums because they are big institutions that have a huge role in shaping our culture. I mean, I think you need to, first, it's, really understanding the role you play in shaping culture and like the values that you're putting out there send a big signal. So I think it's first, like, make sure what you're serving there represents kind of that vision that you're trying to espouse. But I think the thing that sounds like you have a unique opportunity to do that most museums or anybody who's working on this space can is that you can actually bring these experiences to life. And when it's not just like reading something on a wall, which never worked that well for me, I was never inspired by that. But if you can help people get their hands dirty and participate and understand the challenges, like the realities of don't create some idyllic thing. Like, here's like what's happening in the world. Like, here's what these bigger agricultural systems do that are good, and here's some of the challenges, and here's what's great about smaller systems or alternative ways, but here's challenges in terms of scale, and we have a lot of people to feed, and by the way, there's going to be a lot more people in the next 50 to 100 years. I think like giving people the full picture and doing it in a way that allows people to actually get their hands dirty can have a huge impact on people's understanding about what these issues really are, and that there's, it all lives in the gray, even though they're always given to people in sort of this very black and white sort of way.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.